Hello, and a very warm welcome to the last of our sessions at World Water Week, entitled Leading for Leaving No One Behind. It's time to reset, a gold standard session. My name's Kate Orr, and I'm the Knowledge and Learning Manager with the Australian Government's Water for Women Fund. I'm joined here today by my colleague and co-facilitator, Joanna Mott, Water for Women's Gender and Social Inclusion Advisor. Hi, Joyce. Also joining us here today are our co-conveners, the Australian Government Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and the Australian Water Partnership under Australia Water Partners for Development, together with our partners SMV, the Institute for Sustainable Futures at the University of Technology Sydney, IDE, and Plan International. Together, we're so pleased to be igniting this discussion on how we can challenge inequalities at all levels and contribute to a more inclusive and equitable water and wash systems, structures, and services through transformative leadership. A few housekeeping matters for today before we start. Firstly, to ensure greater accessibility to this session, we've enabled Zoom's live transcript closed capture functionality. So you can access this using the CC button in the menu tab. One of the presentations does have captions though, so feel free to turn this on and off at your discretion. We'll also have the chance to answer attendee questions towards the end of the session. So please do add these to the chat box in Pathable as we go. You know the drill by now. Towards the end of the session, we'll also run a Menti poll. So sometimes throughout the session, you might like to pull up another window in your browser and type www.menti.com. We'll provide the code for this later in the session. Our session will start today with a presentation from our Water for Women Fund partner, the Institute for Sustainable Futures at the University of Technology Sydney, who will set the scene for us. We'll then deliver a range of presentations from our partners on leadership in WASH. And this will be followed by an opportunity for you all to engage with our panellists through an open and frank Q&A session. But firstly, to open this session, I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Anna-Marie Renick from the Australian Government Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, DFAT. Anna-Marie is DFAT's Director of Gender Strategy, Effectiveness and Performance Unit and Senior Gender Specialist with DFAT's Gender Equality Branch. Thank you, Anna-Marie.
Hello everyone, my name is Anna-Marie Reering and I'm the Senior Gender Specialist in Australia's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, DFAT. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we work, live and learn, and pay my respects to them and their cultures, and to elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to extend my respects to the Indigenous peoples of the lands on which you are dialing in from today. I'm delighted to welcome you on behalf of DFAT and the Australia Water Partners for Development to this important session at World Water Week, Leading for Leaving No One Behind. It's time to reset. Australia Water Partners for Development, led by DFAT and comprising of the Water for Women Fund and the Australian Water Partnership, are excited to deliver this session together with all our session co-conveners. I would like to thank the Stockholm International Water Institute for providing us the opportunity to be part of this important event. Leaving no one behind is perhaps easy to say, but it's hard to do, particularly if we continue working and living in ways that are considered business as usual. Let us step back and reflect on what type of leadership is needed to ensure that truly no one is left behind. If there is one silver lining through the current COVID-19 situation, it is recognition that it's time for a reset. Gender and social equality, including disability inclusion, are cornerstones of DFAT's water resource management and WASH programs. We recognize that without equality, there is no real development. If the benefits are not shared, they are not sustainable. It's as simple and as difficult as that. Changing entrenched norms that perpetuate inequality is key to leaving no one behind. But we understand how difficult this can be. Norms cannot be undone and reset overnight. Yet the urgency of COVID-19 has been an impetus for leaders to think and act in transformative ways and ensure no one is left behind. In this session, you will learn from some of our partners about how they are actively supporting the voices and agency of diverse women, people with disabilities, and people from other marginalized groups, and strengthening their visibility and decision-making in the water and wash sectors. Not leaving people behind means bringing people with you, listening and learning from them, and supporting their leadership, resilience, and rights. Only in this way can we ensure that they and their communities are counted and accounted for. I trust that this session will spark discussion, reflection, and action on transformative leadership for achieving SDG 6, access to water and sanitation for all, and ensuring our communities are equitable and resilient. I'd like to pass back now to Jose and Kate. Thank you both.
Thank you so much, Anna Marie. Yeah, I mean, strong leadership sounds pretty simple, but you're right. There's a lot that goes into it to ensure inequalities are actively addressed for the benefit of all, as we'll see from our presentations. I would now like to hand to Naomi Carrad, Research Director, and Deanna Gonzalez, Senior Research Consultant, both from the Institute for Sustainable Futures at the University of Technology, Sydney. Naomi and Deanna have prepared a framing presentation that will set the scene for us today, providing background to transformative leadership in all its diversity and posing the question, how can we be and or support transformative leaders? Thank you so much, Naomi and Deanna.
We're starting our presentations today with a framing presentation, setting the scene for the concepts you will hear about during this session. I'm Naomi Carrad from the Institute for Sustainable Futures at the University of Technology in Sydney. My colleague Deanna Gonzalez and I have prepared this presentation to explore some of the basic questions related to today's topic. This work draws on research our team has done in partnership with SNV in Bhutan, Laos and Nepal. In this presentation, we're going to explore a few foundational questions. What is transformative leadership? Why is it relevant to inclusive WASH and WRM? What kinds of people make transformative leaders? What do they do and what can they achieve? These are particularly important questions given our current challenges related to the ongoing pandemic and climate change, when we need leaders who prioritise inclusion and equality while grappling with urgent threats. The take-home messages for this particular presentation are firstly that leadership is about bringing people together to work towards a common goal in formal and informal ways. It's a broad definition of leadership and one that sees leadership as happening in all sorts of settings. Leadership for leaving no one behind has a central focus on the voices and needs of those that have been historically marginalised. So a really strong emphasis on inclusion. Transformative leadership goes even further, prioritising inclusion in ways that challenge the norms and systems that perpetuate inequalities, trying to seek transformations in the ways our societies operate. The big question for us today is how can we be or support transformative leaders? And we'd love you to think about this question as you listen to today's presentations and panel discussion. First of all, taking a step back and looking at the idea of leadership, how do we think about leadership? What is leadership? From the research that we've done, a helpful definition is one that talks about leadership as simply being about social influence. It's about bringing people together to work towards common goals. It can happen in both formal and informal settings. For example, leadership happens in workplaces, in government or private sector organisations, in rights holders organisations. It happens within households and family networks, and of course within communities through both formal and informal roles. What we have on this slide is a definition of gender transformative leadership from UN Women. We've chosen to share this today because gender has been the entry point for the research we've been doing on transformative leadership, but we see the concepts as relevant to all forms of transformative leadership. And what we like about this definition is that it emphasises two things. First, that transformative leadership is about paying close attention to formal and informal power structures and discriminatory practices. And second, that transformative leaders will go beyond seeing these inequalities to seeking ways to address them in their organisations and communities. We want to put this language of transformation in the context of typical concepts used in WASH and WRM. The key point here is that in using the word transformation, we're talking about quite radical change towards new standards and structures in the ways societies function. The figure on the lower half of this slide shows a continuum of how an activity engages with gender equality and social inclusion. And it shares the idea that an activity can be harmful. For example, it might actually increase inequalities. It can be instrumental, targeting women as an entry point for wider change. It can be specific, such as a program focused on disability. An activity can be sensitive to diversity in communities, or it can seek to be transformative, to reshape power structures and norms towards greater equality. So what does transformative leadership look like? Across the many ideas on this slide, I want to share 3 themes. Firstly, that transformative leadership tends to happen through partnerships and collaborations. Transformative leaders build relationships and work in partnership with networks of people and organisations rather than as individuals. Second, that transformative leaders are often themselves diverse. They can be women, men, non-binary, people with a disability, people with very different life experiences, though they do commonly share a learning orientation and a capacity for self-reflection. Third, transformative leaders typically hold values aligned with social justice. This motivates leaders to give voice to marginalised people and to challenge harmful social norms. So bringing these ideas back to WASH and WRM, transformative leadership is something that can occur in and through water, sanitation, hygiene, and resource management activities. Transformative leadership can strengthen inclusion, ensuring no one is left behind, and going beyond that, it can positively influence wider social structures towards equality. Transformative leaders take many forms. They can be working in formal positions of authority, such as in government, in service provider roles, in organisations such as rights holders groups, or they can be working within communities to influence norms and practices. Thank you for being here today to share and learn about transformative leadership. And as you listen to the presentations and panel discussion, please do think about how each of us in our roles can either be or support transformative leaders. Building our collective capacity for transformative leadership is a powerful strategy for us to meet the challenges of our time in ways that truly leave no one behind and create more equal, resilient societies.
Thank you so much, Naomi and Deanna, for the great introduction to transformative leadership. I'd now like to introduce our first presentation, exploring gender transformative leadership in WASH during the COVID-19 pandemic, with a particular focus on Bhutan, Lao PDR, and Nepal. This presentation is also brought to you today by Deanna Gonzalez of Institute for Sustainable Futures at the University of Technology, Sydney. Thank you, Deanna.
Hello, everyone. My name is Diana Gonzalez. I work at the Institute for Sustainable Futures at the University of Technology, Sydney in Australia. Today, I will share insights from a research project we undertook in partnership with SNV, looking at gender transformative leadership in WASH during the COVID-19 pandemic. Our team set out to explore 2 research questions related to inclusion and transformation. First, how are WASH leaders responding to COVID to ensure the needs of marginalized and vulnerable groups are represented and heard? And second, how are they transforming society towards gender equality? This was a qualitative strengths-based study undertaken earlier this year in Bhutan, Lao PDR, and Nepal, and we interviewed 19 leaders working in a range of organizations and roles in the WASH sector. We developed a conceptual framework capturing key dimensions of gender transformative leadership in WASH during the response to COVID-19. It shows that leaders' personal values and traits influence what they do and how they do it, or their leadership style and actions, which in turn leads to gender transformative outcomes. And all of this is influenced by enablers and barriers, which can be personal, collective, and structural factors. I'll give you an example of a finding around actions. Ambika is a leader in Nepal, and she led her team in conducting a WASH sector gap analysis to identify vulnerable groups whose access to sanitation and hand washing facilities was impacted by COVID. In response to the analysis, she promoted GESI-friendly foot-operated hand-washing stations in public spaces and supported vulnerable communities to quarantine. An example of an outcome was changes in public's negative perceptions of women leaders. Namgay, a rural leader in Bhutan, said, "My work made people realize the importance of diversity of voices in the decision-making rooms, particularly on the importance and value addition of women leaders." These are only two examples of findings, and if you'd like to know more, you can access all the detailed findings in a research report and learning brief, which are available in the resources for this session. Now I want to share with you the leaders' visions and wishes for the future. We asked them what would be the one change they would make if they could magically snap their fingers and enable better leadership for equality and inclusion. And 5 priority themes were identified. First, end harmful social norms so we can achieve equal rights for all. Second, promote diversity in leadership, which requires challenging traditional ideas of what makes and who can be a good leader. Third, create better education and capacity building opportunities, which are critical to realize the leadership potential of girls, women, and people with disabilities. Fourth, focus on gender mainstreaming in institutions, for example, government agencies and organizations. And lastly, to take an intersectional approach to gender transformative leadership. The COVID-19 pandemic has created a renewed urgency for thinking and doing things differently. And this comes out strongly in the leaders' words and actions. As we rebuild our societies and economies and continue to champion the delivery of essential wash services, let's do so in a way that actively advances gender and social transformation. I hope you're feeling inspired to be and support a gender transformative leader. Thanks so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Sienna. What a great presentation. Our next presentation comes to you today from Jess MacArthur, also from the Institute for Sustainable Futures. Jess's presentation will centre on gender and leadership personas in civil society organisations, drawing on lessons from Cambodia. Thank you, Jess.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Jess MacArthur, and I'm with the Institute for Sustainable Futures. Over the next 4 minutes, I have the pleasure of presenting some of my doctoral research. My research is part of the wider Water for Women program, and I've been focusing on ID Cambodia's sanitation marketing project for this research. Now, this project helps to create local demand and supply for improved sanitation and is working through a network of sales agents within communities. So my work has been looking at the sales agent network and relevant supporting staff and leadership to identify gender equality outcomes for these staff. Now, all of the staff participated in a gender equality training, and I'm looking at how this training has impacted the experiences of staff members within the program. So to do this, I collected over 200 stories of change. These are retrospective or looking back stories using short audio or text messages, and staff used their own smartphones to share the stories with me last October. I then worked to cluster these stories based on the verbs that they used. Is it a change in what they think or feel or do or have? And then from these different clusters, I created 14 different personas. And a persona is a composite fictional character. So it's almost like a cartoon character, which we use to help understand the different types of changes that are happening for staff. In all, we had over 175 staff who participated in this research. So to understand a little bit of how this change is happening, I'm drawing on a man named Paulo Freire. And Paulo Freire is a Brazilian philosopher who looked at social transformations, looking at empowering communities and individuals to overcome inequalities. And Freire talks about this perception of critical reflection and critical action being these two interconnected aspects. Individuals reflect and then act, and then reflect and then act, and this leads to social transformation. When we looked at our particular personas and we looked at the data that we had, we broke this critical reflection into 2 different categories. One is critical observation and what is critical self-reflection. Critical observation being looking at other people and observing change, and critical reflection is looking inside and reflecting internally. Now you can see here from this diagram that about 50% of our staff were critical reflectors, and about 50% were critical actors. And the idea here is that this isn't necessarily a linear progression, but we want to move staff towards ultimately being actors within the change. And this is not just staff, this is leaders, but all across the chain. So individuals who have particular power or authority within a structure and those who may not. How do we encourage them to be actors within the system? So one particular persona that I'd like to share with you is a gentleman persona, and this is as a man who reflects 11 different individuals within the project. And this gentleman in leadership is now advocating for his female colleagues at work. And ultimately, we can see the different quotations here, but ultimately it came from a period of self-reflection where this gentleman was thinking about how women now are actually able to go to remote areas and actually do the work he thought was only accessible to men. They're actually able to network with government officials and are quite good at it. And so this process of reflection that led then to him acting. And this action is talking about advocating for other women and encouraging not only women to be part of different things, but also encouraging his fellow male colleagues to also include women in different aspects. And so we see from this that we want to move individuals through this process of observation, reflection, and action. And the idea being that transformative leadership is not just focused on women's leadership, but ultimately also focused on male leadership that uses critical reflection to build into action.
Thank you so much, Jess. And just a reminder to all our attendees, if you have any questions for our presenters and conveners today, please do add these in the chat box in Pathable. We now move to Solomon Islands in the Pacific, where we'll hear from NF Petsakibo, the Senior WASH Officer from Live and Learn Environmental Education in Solomon Islands, on enabling community leadership for transformative WASH. Thank you, NF.
My name is Enif Petsakibo. I'm a Senior WAS Officer for the New Times New Target program, which is implemented in Northwest and West Guadalcanal under Live and Learn in partnership with Plan International. Enabling community leadership for transformative WASH is vitally important. It is evident that through the approaches implemented within the program encourages and promotes inclusiveness in leadership roles and responsibility as a driver towards positive outcomes in WASH. In the water safety improvement planning approach, it allows the community to be actively involved in raising issues on water management. Women and men realize their unique contributions and acknowledging that such task demonstrates leadership. We have witnessed that when communities take on the necessary leadership, it provides an avenue for issues relating to water to be shared and brings about collective actions. This approach also allows the process of self-realization through sharing of experiences. It provides room for aspirations and participation in leadership roles, especially for females and youths, offering the opportunity to build the capacity so that they actively participate in the activities. For example, the Good Water Plan Toolkit promotes ownership and valuing water resources. Different sections of the population are involved and tasks can be delegated with equal participation from community members. This is evident in Satona Ward 4, our project site. Leadership role vested on the Water Committee is again being delegated to zone representatives who take on the leadership role to ensure that actions planned are being implemented by individuals, zone, or community as a whole. Community strength assessment gives the opportunity for facilitators, male and female participants, to discuss and self that unique strengths and potentials do exist within the community and themselves as individuals. Power dynamics are also identified, and this helps the program to understand the context of the community better at hand. With the community-led total sanitation, the pre-triggering session involves the leaders that have been identified prior. These leaders were triggered in the approach, then supported the rollout in the community. For example, in Ward 1, zone leaders have made it a priority to ensure individual households do take on the leadership challenge despite of culture as a barrier to advocating for no open defecation. Capacity building and technical training to leaders is welcomed by both male and female as information is power. With the gender wash monitoring tool, it appreciates the difference identified in the household wash loads. Leadership and participation of different target groups within the community on decision making. Facilitating the session and providing a space where individuals acknowledge the potentials and importance of involving young people in decision making and delegating leadership responsibility to have experience. For example, aspirations highlighted have shown that there is desire and understanding on the need to encourage and share leadership roles and responsibility in WAS so that tasks can be completed and there is ownership. All the above implemented approaches do acknowledge that if we encourage and value the importance of empowering individuals, male and female, who have the potential to lead, we will transform WAS in different dimensions.
Thank you so much, Ines. We now move finally back to Cambodia, where we'll hear from Tyler Kazol, WASH Program Manager with IDE in Cambodia. Tyler will present to us today on women entrepreneurs leading to end open defecation. Thank you, Tyler.
Hi, my name is Tyler Kazol, and I'm the WASH Program Manager for IDE Cambodia. IDE's WASH program, our core WASH program, is called Sanitation Marketing Scale Up. We're in our third phase, SMSU3, and we're working with support from Australian Aid, Stone Family Foundation, UNICEF, and USAID. So what we do is we first start by talking with a lot of people, and we design products to context using human-centered design. That's how we build low-cost, aspirational, and locally sourceable products. After that, we work to power up local entrepreneurs so that they can produce and distribute these products. We work to support them with training, capacity building. And last, we have a team of sales agents. Now, these sales agents go out and they do door-to-door sales presentations and generate sanitation product demand. This is how we do behavior change. So after a sales agent will sell a product, we'll send that to a latrine business owner, and then that business owner will deliver the product, install it, and develop a relationship with the customer. Now, these entrepreneurs, these are our change makers. We know that as sanitation coverage increases, attention and funding for this issue is decreasing. So really, one of the best positioned actors to continue to be incentivized to reach those last households without toilets, well, those are local entrepreneurs. Now, the local entrepreneurs that we work with, the vast majority are family businesses. About 95% of the 70 that we work with are family businesses. And what we know is that businesses with at least more than one family member playing a key role in the business can earn more than businesses with just limited family involvement, by about 60% more revenue per month. Now, being a family business can also be a challenge, and about 57% of all of the IDE affiliated businesses are not separating their business from household finances. This is especially an issue because women are working as the financial managers in most of the businesses. And we know that in Cambodia, a lot of women are working to manage finances in their households too. We know that a lot of women are experiencing pressure to spend on behalf of their family, both direct and indirect family. And we've been told by a lot of our female entrepreneurs that they've had to siphon critical business revenue to support the family expense. So unfortunately as well, we know that about 77% of our entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, are not paying themselves a salary. So what we've been doing is teamed up with an organization called She Investments. And the goal has been to support female business leaders to build their skills, build their management capacity, and make a more sustainable sanitation enterprise. First thing that we do is secure family buy-in. We make sure that the husband is engaged from day one. After that, we work with the women to develop financial literacy and debt management. We talk about separating business versus household finances, paying oneself a salary, and other key business necessities. We also make a point to describe gender equality concepts in theory. We know that we're having an impact. Here on the left is Ms. Ramdul Soban. Soban told me, I have the same right to make decisions as my husband. She told me that while standing next to Mr. Boonsiang, who you can see there. And Mr. Boonsiang, her husband, smiled and nodded, agreed when Soban told me, not only has she set her salary, but she set his too, and things are working really well. Now, Ms. Soban is one of quite a few entrepreneurs that we're working with who've experienced similar stories. Now, we know in rural Cambodia, in order to leave no one behind, in order to reach every household that does not have a toilet, we need to be supporting local businesses. Now, in order to be supporting local businesses, we need to be supporting the female leaders who are behind them. At IDE Cambodia, that's what we're trying to do, and that's what we're going to continue to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tyler. This brings us to the end of our presentations. Just a reminder to all our attendees, if you have any questions for our panel and conveners, please add them to the chat. I'd now like to hand over to my co-facilitator, Joanna Mott. Jose will introduce our panel today, and then we'll move to questions. Thanks, Jose.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you to all our presenters. There's so much to digest and reflect on. And I have great pleasure in welcoming our panelists this evening, or today where you're calling in from, who will help us do exactly that. So welcome, Jess. You already know her from the presentation earlier. Jess MacArthur, Research Consultant from the Institute for Sustainable Futures, who is joining us from Switzerland. Also joining the panel, we have Tom Rankin, Senior WASH Advisor from Plan International Australia, who is joining us from Melbourne and is part of the New Times New Targets project in the Solomon Islands, outlined in Anif's presentation. Welcome, Tom. And we also have Rana Abdel Sattar, who is joining us from Cambodia, WASH Innovations and Partnership Manager from IDE Cambodia, who works with Tyler on the project outlined in his presentation. Also joining us is Sarah Ransom, Partnerships and Impact Lead from the Australian Water Partnership, who is joining us from Canberra, and Sering Choden, Gender and Social Inclusion Advisor for SNV, who is based in Bataan and was a central part of the research team for the Transformative Leadership research that Naomi and Diana outlined in their presentations. Welcome all. And again, just a reminder to the audience to include any questions you would like to ask ask the panel in the chat, and Kate will be monitoring to see what questions come up. We hope there'll be time to address a few. But to get the ball rolling, I'll start with the question for each of the panelists first. Starting with Sering, each of the presentations highlighted the link between leadership and leaving no one behind for ensuring improved WASH access for all. To you, what is the critical element or elements of leadership that make this possible?
Thank you, Jose, and hello, everyone. I would like to answer this question by sharing a snippet of an incident in my life. I once met a leader who said her mission in life was to shine others. And for me, this is the essence of transformative leadership. This shows that transformative leaders possess certain personal values and beliefs that influence their leadership style and actions, which can lead to transformative outcomes for all. For example, SNV's experience in Bhutan, Laos, PTR, and Nepal has shown that engaging with leaders who hold strong feminist values and embody principles of gender equity and social justice, they go out of their ways to create inclusive spaces within WASH structures to enhance participation and voice of potentially disadvantaged groups so that no one is left behind. Another element that I would like to highlight is the importance of compassionate leadership when working to bring about transformative change, including within one's organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Sering. Wow, compassionate leadership that and with leaders that help to shine others. I really like that. That's fantastic. And also looking at leaders who have feminist values. Thank you. And Jess, what about you in terms of what you see as the critical elements of leadership? relating to leaving no one behind, particularly coming out from your research?
Yeah, great question. Thank you so much. I think part of it is being able to work within the organizations that these leaders live and work in, and giving them safe spaces to be able to chat about the challenges they're having as leaders, the challenges they're having in bringing up individuals who might be different from them. We had one gentleman talk about the biggest change for him was increased confidence. And I thought this was very strange because we normally associate increased confidence with a gender outcome for women. But he talked about confidence to be able to speak with and engage with the women on his team. And I thought that was a really beautiful picture of this gentleman being able to have confidence to be able to lead his female colleagues in a way that he didn't have before. And so we look at one aspect I'd like to highlight is confidence for men as well as for women.
That's really interesting, Jess, and that importance, as you say, around creating safe spaces for different groups, and that includes men as well. Thank you. Sarah, we've been talking quite a bit about WASH examples, and we know there's a lot of crossover and a lot of connections between WASH and water resource management. But how does this resonate with you, these critical elements? What do you see as the critical elements of leadership for leaving no one behind in water resource management?
Thanks, Joyce, for that question. And I think you're right. There's a lot of attributes that cross between WASH leadership and leadership in an integrated water resource management space as well. And I think some of those critical factors really come down to what people bring along with them into their roles. So this has already been spoken about in some depth by Deanna and Naomi in their framing presentation, but it really struck a chord for me. That's this sense of courage. So transformative leaders will often have a huge amount of personal courage. They might have faced some pretty tough circumstances in their own life, you know, perhaps not fitting into the sort of dominant cultural paradigms in one way or another, and that can really breed a lot of personal courage, which then they are able to bring into their work as leaders, and to go against the grain in some ways, and to help to create those spaces for transformative leadership. The other factor that I think we see in our work is this idea of persistence. That change really takes time, and leaders need to be very persistent and have a deep commitment to the change that they want to see in the world. And that requires a huge amount of personal fortitude. So I think you really see that in leaders as well.
Courage and persistence, and courage for going against the current. That's, yeah, I like that. Yeah, and what about you, Tom? When looking at Anif's fantastic presentation, supporting leadership for transformative WASH outcomes, can you name one strategy that was particularly successful and one challenge that you and the Solomon Islands team are working to overcome in the New Times, New Targets project?
Thanks, Joyce. I did want to just acknowledge Enif and her absence, that I'm stepping in on her behalf tonight because of time differences and connectivity. So thanks for the opportunity. I think pinning this down to a single strategy is pretty tricky, because I do think that it requires a whole bunch of complementary strategies that support each other. But to pick an example, I suppose, that kind of builds on the idea of looking and being reflective of personal biases and power positions, that we have commenced all of our work with communities with a community strength assessment. And in doing that, we do it collaboratively with the community, and particularly with leaders in community. We analyse physical assets and social structures and things. But in doing so, we look at the representation that exists in those structures and the value in the diversity that exists in the community as well. And so I think in doing that, you create some empathy and some better understanding of what's around and inherent in that community and embedded in that community. And that provides an opportunity for people to, I guess, start to make changes towards that transformation as leaders. And I think in doing that, power analysis as well. You often, we look at identifying where our allies are existing in the communities and perhaps where our resistors exist as well, and trying to find our easiest path and avenues to inclusion. I think, there are a lot of challenges, of course, with that work, and probably one of the biggest challenges in our context where gender norms are very entrenched is challenging the status quo and pushing the boundaries as much as we can without doing harm. And I think that philosophy of do no harm is a really critical one, and maintaining that balance of being on the edge and pushing things without going too far is a really critical one.
Can you tell us a bit more about that, Tom, in terms of that do no harm? You said you look at allies and resistors through doing a power analysis with the community. How's with that, how do you ensure that what are some of the strategies that you use around do no harm to with some of the resistor elements?
Sure, I think one of the most critical things, and it's the same in any context, is making sure that the people leading the work and facilitating the work are really super familiar with the context. And so all of our team, give or take a couple, are fluent in local language, and a lot of the facilitation is done in local language. They live and stay in the communities when they're out in the field, and so their understanding of where that line is really good. And I think also having lots of discussions, in preparation for those workshops and events is critical in sort of anticipating where things might go wrong and having things in place to make sure that that we don't go too far. And I think just building those really strong relationships with a lot of people and a diversity of people in communities is a good grounding for that. Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. Relationship building is key. Yeah, thank you. And Rana, for you, what's been the most successful strategy on the IDE project that Tyler was talking about for supporting leadership for transformative WASH outcomes, and the most prominent challenge for in the project that you've seen and had to deal with?
Sure. Yeah, there's to start off with, yeah, I mean, it's the confidence or defying gender norms is kind of a big deal. I think everywhere in the world, including, we're not talking about just Cambodia here for sure. So having that being kind of how we engage with our partners, making sure again that they're having the chance to be a key role of being transformative leaders through our gender mainstream training or through our specific business development and capacity building for women leaders, again, alongside and with kind of that hand-in-hand women and men leadership is one way we've been kind of able to transform and again, slowly but surely go around that challenge that is faced.
Thanks, Rana. Yeah, that and coming back very much to what Tom was saying, that being really familiar with the context and the cultural context to be able to unpack the gender norms in safe spaces. Thanks, Rana. Okay, Kate, have we got any questions in the chat yet? Or
yeah, we've just got one great question coming from Julianne, and she said, great point there. I think she's referring to your presentation, Tom, about studying the community dynamics and making allies. And her question is, what strategies would you implement in an environment that is really hostile to change, perhaps because of their own insecurities or past bad experiences? I'll throw to you, Tom, first, because I think the question came from your answer, but I have no doubt that there's a couple of others on the panel that may have some thoughts there as well.
Thanks, Kate. It's a great question, Julianne. Thank you. I think, I guess this is within a context and perhaps even, in every context, there's going to be different things, a different history, and even between communities, perhaps there'll be different levels of hostility or angst or resistance. And so I think like I was saying earlier, just having a really good understanding and building those relationships with people to understand what that history is and what some of where some of the resistance might come from is really critical. And I think being flexible and adaptive in your approaches, so that you can't force things. You can't force what do they say, a round peg into a square hole, or if you really have to adjust your approach to the context. And I think one of the things that we've really tried to do through that sort of power analysis process is look for allies and find the chinks in the armour, to let people see the value in inclusion and transformation, and leverage that as much as you can. And if that means showing examples and taking people to other villages or letting the word spread a bit, don't force yourself into a community or a specific working environment if they're not ready, and maybe that needs to be given a bit of time to percolate and see what's happening in other locations that are nearby, which might open up some doors that you wouldn't have otherwise had. So I think that's a short offering, and I'm sure others have got something else they could add.
Would anyone like to add to that? I was actually thinking, Sering, I know you being involved in the research that Naomi and Diana talked about, the transformative leadership research, and just wanting to hear a bit about your insights. We're talking about harmful norms and being able to challenge those in different ways. And I know you have done a lot of work with DPOs and supporting people with disabilities in strengthening their voice and leadership. Would you like to talk a bit about that and how you go about that?
Yep, thanks, Jules. So just to talk a little bit about the research that we did with ISF. So what we learned from our research was that particularly when it comes to gender transformative leaders, they tend to build networks and platforms that support gender equality and social inclusion, which was actually exhibited by all the leaders that we talked to as part of the research. For example, Gopnam Gepalden, the first elected female local government leader from Bhutan, championed the formation of a women's network in her district with support from a local women's CSO that SNB supports. And she further motivated her female peers from the community to invest in their leadership skills and inspired them to run, with a few of these women actually winning the local elections. And this is in a setting that has almost no women elected leaders. Wow. And with regards to our work with people with disabilities, SND in Bhutan, as part of our Leadership for Change initiative that aimed at transforming the way the WASH sector in Bhutan engaged with rights holders organizations, including the disability persons organizations, to achieve a more equal and inclusive WASH service delivery. We began with a targeted investment in increasing leadership skills of all, that is women and men, women disability champions, and women disability leaders from our local DPO partners. And we even reached out to the sexual and gender minorities community to ensure that different experiences of diverse persons are part of the Leadership for Change initiative. So working particularly through our local DPO partners, like forming strategic partnerships with them, we have invested in enhancing inclusive women's networks and collective action for influence on decision-making, along with the need to work together with men for increased women's voice and influence on WASH decision-making, including within formal systems and institutions.
Thank you, Sering. Oh, did you have something else you wanted to add to that? Sorry, did I interrupt? No?
No, that's fine. Yeah, I'm done. Yeah. Thank you.
Strategic partnerships and engaging with men, really important strategies. Thanks for sharing that, Sering. And I think, Rana, did you have any thoughts around that from the work that ID is doing?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I just wanted to add on strategy that doesn't need to be too high level and a little bit more practical for, especially in this case, more market sanitation type of approaches. But yeah, I mean, it comes down to the level of, again, understanding the culture, understanding the needs, and really just finding evidence for what is the comfortable and uncomfortable situation that these, the different people we work with are. So for example, when we were selling latrines to households, we realized women may experience verbal domestic violence when they alone take the decision of purchasing a latrine without their husband's consent. And so by doing a strategy, again, on a practical level, where our actual sales agents are providing these households with a new approach of, okay, if you buy a latrine, you don't have to worry, you can get a deposit back, or you don't have to do any huge commitments, there isn't huge repercussions. Those are ways also, again, to allow an enabling environment for the community to speak up and be a little more comfortable with the decision making.
Thanks, Rana. Yeah, that's really important, and you've highlighted some great examples of do no harm, and particularly again that engaging male family members, which came out strongly in the presentation, alongside working on women's empowerment with the female entrepreneurs. Thank you. Alas, I think we're out of time. Is that right, Kate?
Yeah, I think it is, Joyce. I was just going to make reference to a really lovely point in the chat, which probably leads us really nicely into the Menti, from Lucia from AWP. And she said, thank you for sharing what you think the quality of leaders should have. I agree, it's critical to find allies. It can be hard standing alone on one's own inner strength for too long. I think that's a lovely lead in to our next section.
To the next section, indeed. Yes, well, thank you to all the panelists and for drawing out those important lessons. And yeah, Lucia summed it up so well. And the insights and reflections that you had about leadership and how it can make a real difference to leaving no one behind. At the very end, we will highlight some key resources that will enable further exploration on thinking and acting and learning in transformative ways. And I think a lot's been put in the chat already, which is great. So now we're just going to allow the audience to have some time now to reflect and act. So I invite you to go to the Mentimeter link at the top of your screen and in the chat, and answer the following question that's on the screen. What will you do to be a transformative leader or to support transformative leadership so no one is truly left behind? So this is open-ended and, as you know, anonymous. So just giving a bit of time for you to write your thoughts and reflections there. Shine the light on others. That's fantastic. I love that. Walk the talk, always important. Be honest about my expertise and seek complementary experts. So that partnership. Listen actively, work with compassion, celebrate achievements, really important. Engaging local expertise, absolutely. Being a role model for others, that's really important. Recognizing the value of diversity and all the benefits inclusive leadership can bring. That came out in all the presentations, didn't it? Using my privileges and questioning my prejudice. So yeah, being very self-aware, understanding your own biases, mentoring, making sure our own teams are educated about transformative leadership. So before we expect this from others. So yeah, that internal capacity building. Creating enabling environments so that everyone can safely engage and be part of the solution. Challenging norms and calling things out. And again, I think that word safe is so important, in safe ways. And sharing the success stories that highlight transformative leaders and leadership, absolutely. Engaging young people in the industry, lift them up as leaders. That's fantastic. Yeah, so yeah, young men and women and people from diverse backgrounds, that's really critical. Wow. There's a lot there, a really rich range of ideas and actions coming out from the mentee, which show a lot of diversity, but also highlight quite a few commonalities in thinking and acting for transformative leadership. We've got another one just there before we move on. Being a male champion by creating space for and supporting diversity in leadership. Yeah, and that came out in quite a few of the presentations. Fantastic. Yes, so lots of things to take away there. And I'd just like to finish up with some key takeaways from this session. I'll highlight, there were many, but I'll highlight 5. The first one is Anne-Marie Rearink was mentioning in her opening remarks about the silver lining, if there is one from COVID. And I know it's challenging to say that, but it's provided an impetus for transformative leadership and the increasing urgency to leave no one behind in access to water and wash services. We must really take hold of this opportunity to make real and lasting change. Diana's presentation showed us how transformative leaders are doing this through their research in Lao PDR, Nepal, and Bhutan. Secondly, diversity in decision-making. Transformative leadership means changing inequalities that are embedded in systems, norms, and structures to enable diverse voices at the table. This is critical to leaving no one behind. And Anif showed us how bringing the voices of women and youth in WASH community planning processes in the Solomon Islands through the careful identification of power dynamics resulted in more equitable and effective collective action for the community. Third, from the margins to the centre, transformative leaders find ways to empower the marginalised to inform inclusive decision-making. At the presentations all their presentations illustrated examples of how leaders are doing this on a range of levels: family, community, workplaces, institutional levels, and in the business sector. And I heard someone say in another session, transformative leadership starts with the family. I think that's an important element too. And partnership is really the new leadership. Transformative leaders understand that transformative impact is best brought about through partnerships and collaboration. And we saw this in all the presentations, but in Tyler's presentation, we saw how this made a difference in supporting women entrepreneurs in Cambodia through the partnership with She Investments. Lastly, from observation to reflection to action, supporting transformative leadership requires facilitating opportunities for critical reflection, which can then be built into critical action. And we saw the importance of this in Jess's presentation, in which the IDE staff in Cambodia involved in the gender equality training were encouraged to move from reflection to action towards greater gender equality. So quite a few takeaways there. Again, a big thank you to all the presenters and panelists for what you've shared with us today, and also to all of you for making the time to be part of this session and sharing your insights and experience. We hope you've enjoyed the session and hope it gave you good food for thought. In finishing, I'd like to draw your attention to the transformative trio of resources we are launching this week at World Water Week. All 3 examine aspects of transformation in WASH. So we have ISF and SNV's Gender Transformative Leadership in WASH during COVID-19 learning brief and the more detailed research report. This is what Diana shared in the link earlier, and it's on which Naomi and Diana's presentations were based. This research initiative was developed under one of the Australian government's Water for Women COVID pivot projects. And you can also see there the Towards Transformation in WASH, Jesse's self-assessment tool, a tool that was developed collaboratively with the Water for Women Fund partners and the Sanitation Learning Hub at the Institute for Development Studies. This is a tool that supports WASH implementing and research organisations to undertake reflective practice in order to strengthen Jesse transformation in their programming and organisation. The Jesse Change Qualitative Methods Digital Toolkit, lastly, otherwise known as the Qual Kit, which was designed and developed by ISF for equipping practitioners at all levels with the tools, techniques, and resources to undertake remote MEL and bring the voices of women and the marginalised to the centre of WASH programming. We encourage those of you who are looking to strengthen GESI transformation efforts within your own programming and organisation to take a look at these resources. We hope you find them useful, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact us through Waterfwomen email address in the chat. In closing, I'd like to wish you all the very best in taking forward your action, either as a transformative leader or supporting transformative leadership. Thank you all and stay safe.